Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. With me on the panel this morning is Ms. Linda Schultz, joining via Zoom, and also joining via Zoom is Mr. Richard Whitbread. Our assessor this morning is Mr. Nuwan Tutagala Munasenga. And our administrative person is Ms. Phoebe Graywood. My name is Bill Moretsky. I will be chairing the panel as well as this meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the Board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 5 on our docket today. Ms. Graywood, please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Tutagala Munasenga, please state your full name. You're muted, sir. Sorry, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Muted.
Nuwan Tudugala Munasingha.
Perfect. And do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Smith, please state your full name.
Trevor Smith.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Before we begin, any preliminary issues from either party for today?
No.
Doggett?
Not from my side, no.
No, I don't have.
Then we will begin with item 1, 151 Watson Street. I believe this is a cap rate issue only, Mr. Smith, is that right?
In the end, yes.
In the end, okay. Mr. Assessor, you may begin your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 244406. Roll number 050052625500. 151 Watson Street. Roll year 2025. Reference date April 1st, 2023. Assess value 2,773,000. Number of building one that's a one-story building. Actual build year 1991. Number of suites 25. Outdoor parking 25. This is corporate housing. Page 2. You can see the request for income information. No sales history for the subject property. Page 3, you can see the location of the property and aerial picture of the property. Page 4, you can see the income value summary. Average monthly rent per unit, $917. Class and liability 80T. Gross potential rent 275,322. We use 3% vacancy rate. Effective gross income comes at 267,062. We have expense ratio of 51.71, and net operating income comes at 128,964. We have used 4.65 capitalization rate. The estimated market value comes at 2,773,000. I have to mention here, when we are valuing the social housing, this kind of property, to account the nature of the business, that means this is a non-profit organization. So we normally use the law, like we assess this as a below average apartment, and because of that, that's get low average rent and higher expense ratio. Page 5, you can see rent comparables. Page 6, you can see the CMHC rent. I have compared this yearly potential rent based on the CMHC to the model rent. The percentage is 67.96. It's like they are given, they have get a discount of 32% compared to the market rent. Like page 7, you can see the capitalization rate. Those are model-driven capitalization rate. Page 8, capitalization rate evidence. Those following is the sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose of showing these individual capitalization rate is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and the substantiate the model-driven capitalization rate. They are not meant to be comparables specific to the subject property. Page 9, Municipal Assessment Act excerpt. Page 10 to 11, exterior picture of the property. And I have one permit on page 11. That's a kind of old permit. I have added the income and expense information from page 12 to 13 and 14. In page 14, you can see they have allocation to the replacement reserve. And page 15, also income and expense information. Up to page 23, 25. Yeah, up to page 27 and page 28, the CMHC table. And in page 29, you can, I actually add to show you, this is the non-profit organization. I took this information from the website. So based on my information, I'm going to, I feel this is a fair value for the properties. So yeah, this is my end of my presentation. Thanks.
Any questions for the assessor, Mr. Smith?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll cover this now, I guess, for all the properties on the docket today, given the workload at the assessment department, I'm assuming that you haven't had an opportunity to inspect any of the properties?
No, I didn't inspect these properties.
Okay. And does that hold true for the other ones on the docket today as well?
Yeah, no, yeah, not in myself. I found one inspect by my other colleagues. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving forward to capitalization rate then on your page number 7.
Mhm.
So the cap rate, the city of Winnipeg's 2 columns there, the low and the high end, were 20th to 80th percentile. So we're looking at a low end of 4.75%. And the city, first of all, this is model driven, is it, the valuation?
Yes, that's right.
And the model has applied a 4.65% cap rate, so below the 20th percentile.
For this property, right? The 4 finds. Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Okay, I'll cover this just once as well. So on the same page, looking at, so page number 7, the middle paragraph there, and forgive me, I'll just quote this once. For the 2025 general assessment, capitalization rates were derived from model generated estimates of net operating income and sale prices that were time adjusted to April 1, 2023. So if I'm reading that correctly, the capitalization rates that the city derives from sales are not based on the in-place income and expense at the time of sale, but rather model generated net incomes and a time adjusted sale. So they're not the true information from that particular sale. Is that correct?
Normally, I believe, I'm not sure how model works, but we normally do the 3-year stabilization, and we use the actual sale data to derive our capitalization rate.
Okay, those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Schultz, do you have any questions for the assessor's presentation?
No questions at this time, thank you.
Mr. Whitbread, do you have any questions?
Do you have any information that would tell you about the condition of this property, sir?
I don't have any information about the condition of the property because we didn't inspect this property recently. So just only one thing I found is that all permits. That's all.
That you found what?
The permits on page on page 11, there's a permit pulled out on I think 2010. Bottom of the page 11, you can see.
Yeah, I see it there.
Yeah.
Okay, but there was no other inspection, no one else inspected this that you're aware of,
No one else.
okay? I'm fine, no further questions.
Thank you. On your comparisons page, let me find it here, right?
Page 5.
Comparables, page 5. So all of these are co-op, these comparables as well, same as the subject property.
No, those are just a market um, normal apartment, but I believe most of them below average quality apartments.
So the same quality as the subject.
I can't exactly say. I believe so. I didn't check the whole all of them, the quality of the.
So would it be fair to say then that the issues with respect to the amount of rent that you can attain in the subject property being a co-op housing situation, comparing it to the other ones which do not have those restrictions is not really an apples to apples comparison then, is it? In terms of rent value?
Like those are mostly like below average apartment building. So we treated those corporate like non-profit apartment as a below average. So I believe it's not 100% apple to apple, but it's fair to compare with those comparables.
Okay.
And also, like if you see in page 6, you can see the compared to the CMHC rent, that's like 32% below the market rent. So that's also supported the these comparables.
Okay. So maybe I just want to continue a little bit with what Mr. Smith was referencing in terms of the cap rate value that you used.
Okay.
So looking at the chart. So this chart is supposed to support what the model has provided for this property. Is that the concept here? Is that true? It should support it?
Yes, but like in here, it's 20th to 18th percentile, right? So that means if it is in a chart, like both sides have tail 10% from the in a bell curve, we have both sides 10%, right? So that's a little bit further from the 18% aisle. So yeah, that's why it has like different capitalization rate than this chart. That's what I believe.
Not sure I understand there. It has a 10% difference than the 20th percentile. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And why is that?
Maybe because sometime the model gets the location and the quality of the building and also the age of the building. That's effect on the capitalization rate. I am. This is 1991 build, so it's compare a little bit in a like it's not a new building, but it's a kind of a new build. So I believe because of that, that's the reason it has that capitalization rate.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions. So, Mr. Smith, you may begin your presentation then.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So subject property 151 Watson Street, as already referenced, it is a nonprofit housing organization that owns and runs the Place Tranquility Place Housing Co-op Limited, and the intent is to supply housing for low-income residents, in this case of low-income mobility challenged residents. If you have a look at the photos of the subject property, which I've taken of the property, beginning on page 4, you can see the basic nature of the accommodations, the age of the age of cabinetry and bathroom fixtures, etc., the durability of the floor, that type of thing. It's very basic accommodation. They've adjusted bathrooms to accommodate mobility needs, as you can see, so not standard market issue type of facility. Doorways, etc., are widened. All of that has been done to accommodate the needs of the particular residents that they are housing in this facility. So skipping backwards to my page number 3, we have some data on the property. You have the 2025 assessment, $2,773,000. And I give a bit of the history of the appeals on the property. You can see the 2023 and 2020. Our value for 2025, $2,456,000, coincides very well, just coincidentally, with the 2023 reduction and the 2020 reduction, as you can see in the prior history there. The building was built in 1991, sits on 2 acres, and we have a total of 25 units, 11 of them being 1 bed, 11 2-bed, and then 3 3-bedroom units. So, and as already discussed, the improvements essentially date to the date of construction. They replace things as they get broken, but there's been no updating of the facility. So let's skip forward to the valuation itself. The property is operated on a rent geared to income basis. So for instance, the year in question, the actual revenue collected for the property was $162,740. That's shown on my addenda page A2, which would be your 1921, I believe. So that again is rent geared to income. When we look at the level of the rent that's collected versus the facility itself and the market, it's certainly well below what would be appropriate to value the property on. So we're not in any way relying on that revenue that is generated for the property. In this case, we did look at the estimated rent that the city has placed on the property, and we felt that it was appropriate and at a market level and supported. So in this case, we have deferred to the city of Winnipeg's income projection. But just for background, they don't actually collect that amount of revenue. Skipping forward then to my page 12, we are also in agreement with the vacancy statistic of 3% based on the market stats. And at the bottom of the page, we have the expense allowance. So Again, for the year in question, the actual expenses for the subject property were $361,881, which would, well, it would be impossible to value the subject property based on allowing or acknowledging all of those expenses. It simply wouldn't produce a fair representation of market value. So we're not relying on the actual expenses, but I am pointing out that those actual expenses are quite consistent and stay that way over time. So once again, we have deferred to the city of Winnipeg's expense allowance in our valuation. So that takes us down to capitalization rate, which is the main point of contention here. The subject property, again, is a nonprofit housing co-op. I am going to do things ever so slightly differently today. And let's skip forward to my page number 15. And look at the main market brokerages that provide capitalization rate reports on an annual basis or quarterly basis in some cases. Looking at page number 15, I've given you a history from Colliers International, Canada Cap Rate Report for Winnipeg from the last three assessment cycle years, that being 2018, 2020, and 2023. If we look at the top of the page and the chart up there, you can see that they're indicating 5 to 6%. That is for the 2018 year. Somehow that label didn't come through. Apologies for that. So low end of 5, top end of 6. 2020, the middle chart, same thing, low end of 5, top end of 6. 2023, low end of 5, top end of 6. This being for both high-rise and low-rise apartments. Now, they have since made a correction to 2023 and increased those rates from 5.5% to 6.5%. Their report came out in error, and they have since adjusted their rates upwards. So essentially, we're looking at stability over that period of time in that range of 5 to 6%. Moving forward, Cushman & Wakefield Canada Cap Rate Survey for Q1 of 2023. If we look at the two charts at the top there, high rise on the left, which this is not, and low rise on the right, you can see for low rise, they're indicating a low end of 5% and an upper end of 5.75%. Now, these brokerages base their reports on the assumption that these are cap rates that are generated and applied to investment grade properties. So not every property that transacts falls within the range. There are, ones that are, you have duplexes and fourplexes and things of that nature. And then you have situations such as the subject where you have housing co-ops and nonprofits and things of that nature, or properties that are in areas that would not be considered investment grade and the properties themselves aren't. So we're looking at essentially the blue chip properties here that fall within those ranges. So 5 to 5.75% is their typical range. Now, the subject property is not one of those properties. I know that I've used a 5.25 cap rate, and I will explain that when we get to it. But first of all, we need to, as most of what we're doing here today are similar properties, we'll cover this once, and if we can carry forward the commentary and save time, that would be ideal. So looking at my page number 13, and the text at the top of the page. Again, I'll try and cover this off once, but it does apply to most of our properties here today. Determining market value for affordable housing properties for property assessment purposes is difficult, as these properties typically do not transact in the market, and therefore there are no directly comparable sales to utilize in determining market value. Additionally, the social affordable housing properties cannot legitimately be directly compared to standard market apartment transactions, as social housing properties have considerable restrictions and burdens that are not present for market apartments. Rental income restrictions, rental market restrictions, smaller pool of tenants, additional operating expenses, physical condition, and disposition restrictions, as well as other factors, can negatively impact the market value of a social housing property. Then I quote an expert in this particular social housing valuation field, Mr. Richard Poulton, an accredited appraiser from the United States, in his book, Valuation and Market Studies for Affordable Housing. He states, developing a market-derived cap rate for an income-restricted property begins with an analysis of the available rates for similar unrestricted properties. Then these rates are adjusted based on the risk factors that an investor would consider in developing a cap rate. Result is a cap rate based on market factors and associated risks. In the final analysis, property tax assessment must take into account the public purpose of the project, the overall benefits and burdens, and the restricted nature of the operating rents. So all that being said, essentially, nonprofit housing, co-op housing is not the same as standard market apartments. Now, our exercise is to fairly value these for assessment purposes. So the exercise is essentially looking at what the normal market is, and then making an adjustment based on the type of property that we're looking at and the risks that an investor would take on in purchasing a property such as this. So what are those risks? Well, many of them have been covered here. And the way I like to explain it is, if you took two identical properties side by side on the same street, transacting in the same on the same exact date, an investor would look at the two of them. You have your standard market apartment, no restrictions essentially, and then you have your nonprofit and or co-op housing property on the left. And the risk inherent in purchasing that property is significantly greater. You have tenants that are in that property on the basis of the lease that they have in place. They have the legal right to stay there in that capacity moving forward. You can't just purchase the property and immediately turn it into a market housing apartment the next day. Even if you could, there would be significant disruption and loss of revenue, etc., that would be incurred. The risk in buying these is again, they're simply very different from a market apartment, and any astute investor would place a significant premium on purchasing them. Now, all that being said, what does the market say? Well, if you look at the bottom of page 13, we've given you our market survey of capitalization rates from the appropriate time frame. You can see that they typically run in that 5% to 6% type of range, 5 to 5.75, 5.85. There's one or two that are slightly under, and obviously some that are over that. That is typical of the marketplace. The subject property. Now, I've taken the income projection for the subject property into account when we're determining the capitalization rate to apply to this. So we're looking at a relatively small property here, 25 units. we're looking at a situation where the rent has been brought down quite significantly for these units to a level we felt was appropriate. And we have not gone outside of that cap rate range. In fact, in this case, given the size and other factors related to the property, we've applied a 5.25% capitalization rate to the property. Now, I could be slightly higher than that at 5.5%, but I elected to apply a 5.25% cap rate. This gives us our final market value of $2,456,000. This is all summarized on my page number 17. You can see the city of Winnipeg's valuation adjacent to our valuation. If you move forward into the addenda materials, it simply gives you the income and expense that was submitted. And at the back, you have the Board of Revision decision from the last cycle, which was based on the applicant evidence, which I have also provided. That is my presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Assessor, any questions on the applicant's presentation?
No questions.
Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
Go ahead and ask Ms. Schultz, please. I'm looking for something. And
No
I'll come back.
questions at this time.
Then I will see if I have any questions.
Okay.
So if I understand your point of your arguments there in terms of the risk associated with these types of properties, like you could not put these properties on the market. Is that what you're saying? You know, if somebody wanted to buy them and just turn them into normal income producing properties, they wouldn't be able to do that.
It would be a very difficult, long, lengthy process to do something like that. They may ultimately be able to do it in time, but it would be costly and would very dramatically affect your return on that property. So you may be able to do it, but the purpose, mandate and purpose of the entity that owns it is to operate it as a nonprofit housing. So they would have very difficult time in being able to sell it themselves in the first place.
The nonprofit would have.
The nonprofit would, yes.
Okay. But just physically, the units themselves, are they the same as which you would find in the market?
Not in this case, they're not. No, as I said, it's designed for mobility. So the doorways are bigger, the kitchens are laid out for those with ability challenges, and as well as the bathroom fixtures and height and access, etc. Right.
So it would just look different than a quote unquote normal situation.
Well, yes, they're much wider open. Again, the finishes themselves are of a lower end durable type of nature, as you'll see in these type of nonprofits. And yeah, I mean, if you think of it from a normal market renter, and they were again looking at a standard market apartment versus this one that is, you know, designed for other uses, they would probably pick the other one to rent, apples to apples.
So you think this should be assessed on the basis that it's a nonprofit co-op housing, period? That's yeah.
Well, so I'll be careful how I
Lower
answer
income
that.
yeah.
So the challenge, of course, is to assess these for market value. What would they transact for? So in order to do that, you have to look at what, you have to make adjustments to essentially how they operate to kind of bring them in line with what a fair market representation would be on the income and expense side, and then acknowledge the significant additional risk in purchasing these in the capitalization rate. So that's what we've tried to do. In this case, we're in agreement with the city down to the NOI, and then we differ obviously on the cap rate.
Okay. Mr. Whitbread, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I found what I was looking for. On the bottom of page 14, the last paragraph, you reference a 4.6% to 7.9%. Now, is that inclusive of the 15 items on page 13?
I believe it is, unless you caught an error, Mr. Whitbread, which does happen from time to time. 4.6 is certainly the low end from what I'm seeing.
7.9 on page 13, but I just wanted to confirm that it's inclusive of both. Because there is 7.9 on page 14.
Yes, it's inclusive of both, yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. And no, I'm fine. I think my other question was answered. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Assessor, do you have anything in summation?
Yes. Basically, Mr. Smith mentioned the issue with this type of the property. So that's why we treat this as a below average market apartment. And in this case, the vacancy rate 3%, and also we have given the average rent, lower average rent per unit, and also we have given them a higher expense ratio. So if we use a lower capitalization rate, we are double dipping the that risk amount. So what we are trying to do here, we try to give the lower net operating income, and we are going to use the market capitalization rate to get the value. Like in page, my page 8, the Young Street sales supported our capitalization rate. So I believe this is fair value for the property. That's my submission. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, anything in summation?
Well, I wasn't going to have one, but now I think I need to respond. It's not really a summary, more of a presentation, but anyway, there is no double dipping here. If you look at the actual revenues and expenses, the revenue is significantly under what the city has projected, and the expenses are significantly higher than what the city has projected. So no, they're not adjusted to that. Do we feel they're at market? Yes, that's why we're in agreement with them. And then you need to take into account, as I discussed, an investor's perspective on buying this property versus a standard market property when applying the capitalization rate. We've gone through that extensively. I'll answer more questions on it if you have them, but there's no double dipping here. The changing to what we believe is market level, getting down to the NOI, has no impact on what capitalization rate should be applied to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That then will conclude this item number 151 Watson Street. And now we will proceed to item number 211 Dorset. Not sure how to pronounce that, Dorset. Okay. This is an application for revision of assessed value. Mr. Assessor, you may begin your presentation on this property.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 243912, roll number 14021560200, 11 Dorchester Street. Roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023, assess value 13,535,000, liability taxable. This is a non-profit non-corporate housing. And number of building 24. That's all of them 2 stories. Actual build year 1996. Number of suites 200. Outdoor parking 244. Page 2.
You
You
indicated
can
1996. It's 1966. Is that correct?
sorry.
Year
If
built 1996. You said it's 1966.
it's 1966.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes.
A request for income information. You can see in the page 2. No sales history for the subject property. In page 3, you can see the location and aerial picture of the property. And page 4, you can see the income value summary. Average monthly rent per unit 962. Gross potential rent 2,308,920. Vacancy rate 3.3. Effective gross income comes at 2,232,726. Expense ratio 52.11. Net operating income comes at 1,069,252. We have used a 7.9 capitalization rate. So estimated market value comes at 13,535,000. And I have to mention here, as I mentioned before, we treat this as a below average market apartment. So we have given them model actually given them 52.11 expense ratio. That's a higher side of the expense ratio, and we have given them the low average rent. Also, somehow you can see the capitalization rate 7.9. So somehow the model derived this 7.9. That's a kind of higher capitalization rate for this property. But so page 5, you can see the rent comparables. And page 6, I have compared the CMHC rent to the actual model rent. So it's like comparing to the yearly potential rent to the model rent, it's 63.4%. That's like comparing to the market rent, it's 36.6 discount. And page 7, you can see the capitalization rate. Those are model driven. And page 8, you can see capitalization rate evidence. Those following is the sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose of showing these individual capitalization rate is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-driven capitalization rate. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. So page 9, Municipal Assessment Act expert. Page 10 to 13, you can see the external outside picture of the building. Page 14, you can see income and expense information. Mhm. Page up to page 21 and 23, all of them income and expense information, and page 24, the CMHC rent table. So using we have used the lower in here. So we treat this as a lower below average apartment, and because of that it has given the low average rent and higher expense ratio, and also this one have higher capitalization rate. So I believe this value fair for the property. This is the end of my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, any questions for the assessor on his presentation?
Yes, just quickly. So capitalization rate again, this is also model driven.
Yes.
There's been no change to the cap rate.
As I know, I checked, no any override or anything. I'm not sure why this capitalization rate a little bit higher.
So we have the prior property that we were looking at had 4.65, and it was a housing co-op as well. The subject property has a 7.9. I'm just wondering exactly how the model would produce such a wide disparity.
I believe maybe the location and the age of the building is the reason, and the unit count, the number of units. So it's a huge unit count, and that's a separate building for if you see the picture, it's like not the one apartment building in a 200 unit, it's a separate building, and because of that, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe because that's the reason the model given that capitalization rate.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
This complex is got boroughs on appears the north side and Keewatin on the west side. I'm looking at your map 3. Is that a desirable neighborhood?
I'm not 100% sure. I believe it's not that much. It's a kind of average or a little bit near to the below average, kind of.
You're not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure about it.
I can wait and ask Mr. Smith. Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Schultz, any questions?
Yes, just one question. So there's pictures of the external building. Have you inspected the inside at all?
Actually, my colleagues have inspected it. How I said, it's not really inspection, because he was work for the water and waste, and then he joined to our department. And when he was in a water and waste, he went there and did his work, and then he mentioned in note saying, oh, this is an average kind of apartment, and I think he mentioned it because this property was reviewed for this cycle, and then he noticed the 7.9 capitalization rate. He mentioned in there, this is, I don't know why this capitalization rate in here, why models given this capitalization rate. Because of that, he mentioned that thing. That's all I found.
Okay, so like there's been no upgrades to may say that this is an above average property or anything like that?
No.
Okay, and there's been no permits or anything like that that have been taken out to do any kind of extensive remodeling or anything?
No, as I know, no.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
On page 5, your rent comparables, those other properties, 1, 2, 3, 4 comparables, are they the same quality as the subject property?
I'm not 100% sure about that. I believe these are same as the subject property.
I don't have any more questions. So, Mr. Smith, you may begin your presentation.
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to start with, and I'm trying and phrase this well, but I'm not sure that we should place any weight on a City of Winnipeg employee that worked for a different department that was there for a different purpose, not doing an inspection of a property, but probably doing water and waste work. Obviously, I'm not sure that constitutes an inspection of the property. Anyway, moving beyond that, the subject property, 11 Dorset. I have worked for this organization for quite a number of years. I have inspected the property numerous times. It is certainly a below average property in terms of the units, in terms of their size, in terms of the build out, in terms of the structure, and certainly in terms of the location. What I will get everybody to do at the beginning here is go to the very back of my brief, the last 2 pages, perhaps the last 3 pages. And I'm not saying that this happens on a daily basis or anything, but as you can see, there's a report from April of 2022 of a homicide occurring adjacent to the subject property in the Manitoba housing facility at 1600 Burroughs, which is known as Gilbert Park. This is the largest Manitoba housing project essentially in the city. It's known for significant social and economic issues, criminal activity, violence, obviously. There were other reports that went back in time. I simply included one. It's not a desirable area, and it's not likely to change anytime soon. So that's the background on the area. Let's move forward into the valuation itself. So the cover page has an exterior. There are indeed 24 different buildings here. So what that means is that you have 24 different unit, or rather roofs. You have individual operating systems for each unit. Essentially, you have 24 exteriors that need to be maintained. You have, in this case, just 11.5 acres of area that needs to be maintained. Expenses are obviously going to be higher than for any typical market apartment, or indeed most townhome developments as well. So again, moving forward, page number 3, you can see the 2025 assessment, 13.5 million. 2023 was not reduced when was appealed to the municipal board and awaits scheduling. You can see the history prior to that and the reductions achieved, generally proceeding in an orderly fashion. And we have not changed our modeling of our methodology of how to approach this property. We've kept it consistent all along. One thing to note here that is important and does have an impact on value, Will Park Housing Co-op Limited doesn't own the property. They're the lessee. The city of Winnipeg is the actual owner of the property. When co-ops were developed, in many cases, the property was owned by either Manitoba Housing or City of Winnipeg, and they essentially loaned them the land to develop their facility on for a lease fee every year, which can vary in size. But ultimately, they don't own the property. They're not directly able to transact it themselves. Property was built in 1966. And you can see the unit count there, 199, and the breakout of units as shown. Now, property of this size obviously needs to have an office, and one of the units is an office, and they don't generate any revenue from that. So we have a total of 199 units versus the city's 200 units. That's always been the same. It's never changed. Cycle after cycle, it remains the same. Will Park Housing is a nonprofit and operates on that basis. So let's move forward to the photos beginning on page 4, some externals. Then you can see the internals on page 5. There is no upgrading here. When required, they will replace flooring as needed, or if things get broken in kitchens, etc. They will either make repairs or replacement when needed. But there is no overall renovation to this property. It's essentially in a dated condition. You can see the photos of generally what we're looking at. Further description on page number 9, but overall, it is certainly a below average property in terms of condition. Looking at co-op housing on my page number 10, there's description of how co-op housing operates. Again, it's essentially nonprofit housing. The site itself is shown on page number 11. And you can see the overall size of the property and layout of the 24 individual units. So obviously there's a lot of structure to maintain and the costs associated with that, as well as the cost of servicing the overall site area of 12 acres or whatever it is, in terms of snow clearing, repair, lawn cutting, etc. Let's move forward, page number 12. I've already discussed the location being just to the north of Gilbert Park. It's also immediately adjacent to the Inkster Industrial Park. So again, obviously not an ideal location in terms of a residential property. Just for background information, and this information is slightly dated. I wasn't able to update it directly as the census has changed, but it does give you the overall picture. There's been no dramatic change. Comparing Winnipeg CMA overall to the actual census tract that the subject falls within, you can see average value of owned dwelling is not half the size, but almost half the size. Median income significantly below the city. Monthly payments for rent, obviously well below the city. Significant unemployment, etc., etc. I won't go through it in detail. I just put it there as support that the area is not an area that would draw significant interest from investors. Now, skipping forward to ownership on page 13, I discussed this briefly. Again, City of Winnipeg owns the property, and this under a lease agreement with Willow Park Housing Co-op, which extends through 2034. Now, they provide them with a lease on obviously a $1 level, so there's no significant cost to the owners, or rather to the housing co-op. But that is not the point. The point is below. Following is a summary of the significant terms of the lease. Point number 1 there, or J, at the end of the lease, the lessee essentially has to give up the premises to the owner of the property, if that is the owner's wish. Peaceably surrender, yield up all the demised premises together with all buildings, erections, et cetera, in good condition and repair. Point number 2, or K, is that fixture improvements place for the structures, etc., are declared to be part and parcel of the demised premises, and go with the property. The lessee, free to sell or assign its interest, which is only the lease, in the demised premises. No such sale can be performed or observed, and the terms and conditions. Sorry, I'm trying to paraphrase here and not doing a great job of it. Essentially, they cannot sell and absolve themselves of their responsibilities under the lease. So by sell, I mean sell their interest, not the property, because they can't sell the property, they don't own it. If the point 0 at the bottom, if the expiration of the said term, the lessee shall remain in occupation. The occupation shall not, in the absence of further agreement, writing, constitute. They do not get month to month, essentially. And the other point is, if the city wanted them to demolish all of the structures erected on the property, that would be required as well. Now, I'm not saying that the city is going to do that, but it does add complications to any purchase of the property, right? If we're looking at purchase of standard market apartment, identical to this one, side by side, and in this case, there is a question as to whether the property can be sold, what the city would decide to do, what payment they may require for their interest in the property, any restrictions they might put on it with regard to development. Very significant difference with regard to the sale of this property versus any other property. So let's skip forward. Property rights appraised. This speaks directly to that. Under fee simple ownership, there are what's referred to as the bundle of rights. And in appraisal theory, these rights include the right to sell an interest, the right to lease an interest, the right to occupy the property, the right to mortgage an interest, and the right to transfer an interest. So the Willow Park Housing Co-op is not the owner. So the only interest that they could transfer would be their lease, which would be subject to City of Winnipeg approval. They essentially can't lease it. They can occupy it, obviously, or mortgage it if needed, given the okay of the city, but most definitely they cannot sell the property. So obviously that has an impact on value if you don't own the land under the structure that you're valuing. So let's skip forward here into the valuation, page 15. Willow Park Housing rental charges are shown at the bottom of the page. And the number of units of each type. So the rent range is shown there. They are based on the size, the location, and essentially the age and condition of the property. We've given you rents from other, pardon me, other cooperative and nonprofit housing on the following page. You can see the rental rate ranges there. There are no one bedrooms really to look at. But the range does generally support what we're looking at. And CMHC stats at the bottom of the page. Now, following that, we have the CMHC townhouse stats on page number 17. Now, there's no direct townhouse stats in the immediate area, that Lord Selkirk area, as there simply aren't enough townhouses or information collected there to support a defendable stat for CMHC. Now, pardon me, Willow Park East Housing Co-op, completely separate entity, developed at a different time, is located immediately to the east, not west, of the property, and is considered to be most comparable. It's also constructed on leased land. Rents there are $758 for 2 beds and $862 for 3 beds. Again, supportive of the structure of the subject property. Based on our review of the market, we feel that their rents being charged are indicative of the location, the size of the units, the condition, and the general market. So we're going with the in-place rents for the revenue side of our property. To this, we've added the actual parking revenue for the subject as well. Moving forward into my page number 19, we have used the same 3.3% vacancy as the city. And our expense analysis is shown on page number 20. Now, we did have 3 years of history with regard to the expenses of the property. And we've done a detailed analysis of this to stabilize it for 2023, not 2021. And you can see the resultant expenses there. $1,185,335. Now, when we get to my comparison, the actual dollar amount is very comparable to the city of Winnipeg's expense projection based on a percentage of effective gross income, which I think is important to look at. Now, how did we do the stabilization? Well, you can see the notes on the right-hand page. I'll direct you to repair and maintenance. We see a very consistent amount of $473,000, $484,000, $453,000. I've reduced this dramatically to $1,100 per unit in order to essentially bring it in line. Now, does that mean that's what will be spent? No, they have to spend considerably more. Again, we have 24 different buildings, and it was built in 66 and has significantly aging infrastructure and finishes, etc. So we've made appropriate adjustments to bring this in line with market. Expenses are actually higher than what we have projected. They're in that $1.6 million range as shown on page 20. So that's the background. Cap rate. Well, we've covered this extensively. I won't go through it again. I'll trust that my comments from the first property can carry forward, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. If there's any particular points that need to be raised, I will raise them, as I did with the ownership of the property. Now, Willow Park Housing is not the owner of the property. They do have to essentially give up the property at the behest of the city at the end of the term of their lease in 2034, if that is what the city decides. And not that they will necessarily, but there is that element of question out there. So if you look at this property as a purchaser of the property, you're really only getting a leasehold interest. And if you were buying it as an investment, well, at the end of the term of the lease, the city might have a dramatically different view of a property owner buying it for income purposes versus a nonprofit operating the property as it was originally intended. Now, the rest of my comments remain the same. And if we go through capitalization rate again, the typical range that you're seeing is in that 5 to 6% range. Obviously, some slightly below and obviously some higher than that. For the reasons that we've discussed, and given the location, the size, the condition, desirability of the property, we've used a capitalization rate of 6.5%. Now, this is all summarized on my page number 26. So again, revenue is there for you. We believe that's supported by the evidence we provided. The actual expense allowance, which we ran through, if you look at that in comparison to the dollar figure of the city of Winnipeg, very close. Obviously, if you have lower revenue, that expense allowance percentage is going to show as higher and be misleading, but the actual dollar amount is very similar to what the city has projected in their model. And then we cap it at 6.5% to give us our final market value of $10,130,000. Now, what I've done on that chart as well is give you the City of Winnipeg 2025 analysis adjacent to their 2023. And if you look at the cap rate, well, it's interesting is all that I will say. 7.9%, certainly an interesting model generated capitalization rate. So that is essentially my presentation. The income and expense is in the addenda for you to review if you need, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Assessor, any question for the applicant on his presentation?
Yes. So you mentioned they have using one unit as a office. Did you inspect the property?
I did.
Okay. You know exactly they are using that as a office, right?
They do use it as the office for their cooperative housing entity, yes.
Okay, because I need to make a note and update it.
Certainly.
And second question, so these are a non-profit organization, and you have stabilized their expenses, right? So normally, if the corporation or anything's run for non-profit, they are not optimize their profit. Because of that, those expenses might be higher than normal apartment. So do you believe we can compare those expenses to the normal apartment, or?
Yes, so I take your point, and I did discuss that actually. So we've given you the actual expenses for the prior 3 years, and then done the stabilization for that property to make it appropriate or comparison to market property. So the actual expenses run from 1,520,000 up to 1,617,000. Now that's certainly above market, no question, which is why we go through the stabilization exercise. So if you look at the stabilization exercise and the changes that we have made, it brings it directly in line with the marketplace. And if you look at the actual projected stabilized amount of $1,185,335, it's very similar to the city's projected expense allowance.
Okay, thank
So
you.
yes,
That's all
that
my
keeps in
questions.
mind.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Ms. Schultz, any questions for the applicant?
Yes, just a second. I gotta close my door. My dog's decided to bark. Okay, so based on page 5, you've got the rent income as of 2018. Is there anything more current?
Page 5.
No, page 15.
Oh, sorry.
You've got Willow.
Sorry, so my apologies. This particular report has a couple of typos in there, that being one of them where the rental charge heading was not changed. That is actually from the appropriate time. That's as of the end of 2022.
Okay. All right, perfect. Then that's all my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
President, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at this and you tell me if I'm going off base here, please. And I know we're not supposed to look at past evaluations, but they were board ordered. And we take a property and I take it, we call it a nonprofit. Mr. Smith, is that fair?
That's fair.
We take a nonprofit property that was valued at $6,900,000 in 2016. And 8 years later, it's valued at $13,535,000. And if we actually applied a cap rate that was different than the 7.9, this could be valued as high as $18 million. I'm puzzled by the numbers I see here, Mr. Smith. Can you comment?
Well, certainly, I mean, I guess what I can tell you, Mr. Whitbread, is that the methodology that we have used ourselves in valuing the property hasn't changed over these cycles. We've been consistent in how it's been done, and you can see the appeal history there, and you know, where there were some aberrations, they've been appealed to the municipal board. So what we saw was essentially very significant jump in 2023 when there was no reduction applied, appealed to the municipal board, obviously, and then a spike again for 2025. I'm a little puzzled, I have to say, by the city's modeling as well. I guess, and I can't directly comment as I'm not involved in it, but what I can say is that the other aspect I haven't talked about with regard to cap rate is that there were exceptionally few transactions happening in later in this cycle because of the interest rate environment that we were operating within, with 4% rise. So you essentially saw sales drop off a cliff. You don't really see sales from that time frame. So the number of true transactions in the city's model is probably not what it has been in the past. I think I did also describe or quote from the city's cap rate page of 7, where they're not actually using the income and expense from the sales transactions themselves, but model generated estimates of NOI versus time adjusted sales. So it's very difficult to say, I guess, quite how that model ultimately functions, or if it's representative of true market. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Somewhat, I guess. We use the phrases like true market and market value. But from a hypothetical point of view, is that really accurate when we talk about a property that is highly likely to ever be sold? Like, do the normal market forces apply to a property like this, Mr. Smith?
Well, so we are getting theoretical here, and
Yeah, a little bit.
I'll give you my answer to that. And that being, there are exceptionally, vanishingly few sales of nonprofit properties in the marketplace for obvious reasons, and so there is no way to look at transactions of these type of properties in order to look at fair market value, comparing one to the other. So the exercise, as always, is how do you fairly value them and compare them to market value? Well, you look at the appropriate income and expenses for market for the property, but you cannot ignore the legal and market-driven restrictions and risks for those properties. So you try and value it as a market apartment as far as what they would generate in the marketplace down to an NOI, and then you need to make adjustments with regard to how that property would be purchased by an investor. So you have typically properties that have lower income and higher expenses, and in some cases they have support from funding agencies and things of that nature, right? That as an investor you're not going to have access to, but you're stuck with the situation that you're buying, with the tenants having the legal right to remain in place under the structure that they were operating under. So very, very significant difference in acquiring a property such as this. I try and be conservative in my estimates as far as what I'm applying to this, which is why I'm at 6.5 and not 7.9%.
Your 658,000 NOI as well. Half, roughly, well, not quite half, 60% of the owner's NOI makes a big difference. Okay, I'm fine. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who owns this building then? City of Winnipeg?
The city of Winnipeg owns the property, yes, so ultimately they own the structures.
So they're the ones that are paying the taxes to the city of Winnipeg.
No, so the sole tenant, Willow Park Housing Co-op, is responsible for the taxes for the property.
I see. Okay. And they're the ones that are appealing. You're
That's
representing
correct.
Willow Park Housing?
I am representing Willow Park Housing as I always have, yes. So they're the sole tenant responsible for the care and maintenance and operation of the entire thing, as well as the property taxes.
I see. Okay. That was confusing me a little bit, so I just needed to clear that up. All right. I don't have any further questions. Anything in summation, Mr. Smith?
No, thanks.
Mr. Smith, anything in summation?
I'm fine, thank you.
Would everybody be okay with a 10-minute break?
Sure.
Okay,
Yes.
this concludes item 211 Dorset, and we're going to take a 10-minute recess.
Okay.
Meeting is back to order. We are going to proceed to our next item, number 3, property at 700 River Road. This is an application for revision of assessed value. Mr. Assessor, you may begin your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 4221, roll number 080055555600, address 700 River Road, roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023. We have two classification. Of, assess value for 40 institutional, 708,000, and for 80 residential 3, 18,796,000. Total assess value 19,504,000. A number of building 4, actual build year 1976 to 1977. Number of suites, 151. Outdoor parking 150. Page 2, you can see request for income information. Subject property has 1 sale history. And page 3, you can see income value summary. Average monthly rent per unit, 1,318. I'm going to read the 80T portion first. Gross potential rent, 2,373,534. Vacancy rate, 3.6. Effective gross income comes at 2,288,087. Expense ratio 55.64. Net operating income comes at 1,014,995. Cap rates at 5.4. Estimated market value for the 80T, 18,796,000. I'm going to read the retail portion, 40E. Gross potential rent, 52,054. Sorry. Vacancy rate, 5%. And effective gross income comes at 49,451. Shortfall, $7. Expense ratio, 3%. And net operating income comes at 46,722. We have used 6.6 capitalization rate for retail portion, and the estimated value market value comes at 708,000. Page 4, you can see rent comparables. And page 5, top, you can see rent comparables for the retail portion. And I have to mention here the subject property area is 3,558 square feet, and the net rent 14.63. So that's and page 5 also, in the bottom of the page 5, you can see comparison to the CMHC rent. It's a 94.56. And page 6, you can see the location of the property and aerial picture of the property. And page 7, capitalization rate evidence. Those capitalization rates are model driven. For page 8, you can see the capitalization rate sales. And subject, I believe subject property, the capitalization supported by sales on 150 Henderson Avenue and 473 Burroughs Avenue. And page 9, Municipal Assessment Act excerpt. Page 10 to 12, exterior picture of the building. Page 13, you can see income and expense information, and bottom of the page you can see the capital cost summary. They have spent 108,191 for capital cost in 2022, and 2021 they have used capital cost 231,072. That's in a page 15, and page 19 you can see they have utilized the capital cost of 238,295 for the 2020. As I mentioned, this is a non-profit housing, and this is my end of my presentation. I believe the 19,504,000 is the fair value for the building property. Thanks. This is
Mr. Smith, any questions on the assessor's presentation?
Yes, just quickly, so just to confirm, the class code 40 institutional property fully exempt, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
40, yes.
All right, and my next question is cap rate related. So we have this is also a nonprofit housing cooperative, roughly the same size as the last one, and built just 10 years newer. The model is assigned cap rate of 5.4 to this one versus 7.9 to the last one, 2.5% capitalization rate percentage difference. Do you have any comment with regard to that, Gulf?
I believe the location of the property and the age of the property. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Okay, thank you.
You're done, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Schultz, any questions for the assessor?
Just one. Have you inspected this property other than the pictures we see from the outside?
No, I didn't inspect the property.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
Just puzzled here. Did I see your evidence showing a sale in 2015, $200,000, which makes no sense to me. I can't reconcile that to what I'm seeing here. Because the building was put up in 76 or 77. Do you know what that's about?
I'm not sure, actually. Yeah, I'm just wondering why was that. Yeah, I couldn't find what is this information is.
Heck of a
So
deal, right?
yeah, I
That's
can't comment.
that's something you folks should clear up, I guess. It's just a little bit confusing.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Now, this one, I'm seeing a market value of 125,000 a suite on this unit. What do you attribute that higher value to? I know the value is there, but is it the area? Is it the location primarily, as you've suggested?
I believe the area and the location. This is the nearest to the like adjacent to the river, and this is not the bad area. I believe because of that, the reason.
But you can't make any comment, can you, about the quality of the building, the quality of the fixtures around the building?
No, I can't because I didn't inspect the building.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
On page 4, you have your comparison again. In the past properties, I've seen that your average monthly rent was usually significantly lower than or I believe they were significantly lower than the comparables. However, in this particular case, it seems like they're right sandwiched in there. The subject property is kind of sandwiched in the values of the comparables. Any comments on that? Why that would be this case? First of all, am I correct in saying
Yes,
they were lower before?
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why
I'm
not
not
this
sure.
time?
Yeah, I'm not sure why. I believe this is because of the area. And in the area, the rent is higher. I'm not actually sure about that. I can't comment on that.
Did you also use the CMHC comparison? You did, and it was 94.56% this time, which is quite a bit significantly higher than what they were in the past, right? The past properties.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Any comments on that?
No comments.
I have no further questions then. Mr. Smith, you may begin your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll clear up as best I can anyway, without the documentation, but the sale history that you had noticed there, Mr. Brett, and I didn't I didn't pull the documentation on this, but in discussion with the owner and having owners and having represented them for quite a number of cycles, property is a nonprofit housing co-op. As with most of these places, they started on or they were developed on land that they didn't own. So in this case, it was Manitoba Housing that owned the land, and Village Canadian that was the lessee or tenant. Now, in 2015, they were able to essentially acquire that from Manitoba Housing. Now, I don't have the documentation behind that, nor have I looked at it, but it appears as though they paid a fee to Manitoba Housing of $200,000. Don't quote me on that, but that would be what appears to be the case. Now, of course, we can't base market value on $200,000 payment, but that seems to be the history of that particular issue. Just for background. Now let's move into the property itself. 700 River Road. This is a nonprofit housing cooperative operated in St. Patel. They have 2 locations, this one and 515 Meadowood, which I believe we deal with next. The background of the property is shown on my page number 3, and you can see, pardon me, the history of the property with regard to assessment from 2023. And from 2020, goes back further than that, obviously. We are not dealing with leasehold estate. This is a fee simple, as they do own the property. That is simply a typo and should have been taken out. My apologies for that. Property was built in 1976, 77. And sits on 12.1 acres, so considerable size area, lots to maintain. And we do have a total of 4 different buildings here in total, but it is row housing, so we're not looking at a tower with one roof. Essentially, we're looking at a lot of infrastructure to maintain, essentially. So number of suites, we have 150 suites. Versus the city's 151. This has never changed. It's not an office situation, as their office is in the same building as the 40E institutional exempt portion. So it's not like they've converted a unit. There's only 150 units. 36 of them 2 beds, 104 3 beds, and 10 4 beds. So that is the background. Let's move forward to the property itself. I have inspected the property. These are the photos from it. They have done some capital investment in recent years to the exterior envelope, as noted by the city. So there's been some improvements made, necessary, very necessary improvements, well overdue. To the exterior envelope for the property, and I think they did put air conditioning in some of the units as well, as noted in the city's presentation. Description of the units is on page 9. Again, they're very basic in nature, suitable for the purpose that they're designed for, to provide, pardon me, low-cost housing to low-income residents that require it. Let's skip forward to my page number 11. So again, the site that we're looking at is 12.1 acres in size. If you look at by page number 11, you can see the extent of it. And the large amount of infrastructure to maintain, obviously parking areas, as well as exterior grassed areas, etc. And the buildings themselves. Very significant amount of infrastructure to maintain, and the costs that go along with that. The property location, it's in St. Vital, shown on page 12 with the star on the map. On river roads to the west of St. Mary's. So that is the location. We can jump into the valuation of the property on my page number 14. So the chart in the middle of the page shows you the actual rent charged for the units. By number of beds, so you can see the range there, 1,068 to 1,253, giving you the annual rent produced there, $2,064,408. What they collected for 2022, very similar to that, $2,051,441, taken from their income and expense at the back of the brief. The CMHC market reports are shown there for you, average rental markets for standard markets and apartments. And we also provide you with our chart on page number 16 of comparable nonprofits and the rents that they have assigned as well. So if we look at the rental rate ranges there, we're looking at 4 beds coming up to the 1,200 plus range, 3 beds with some variability, but 1,000 plus, and then the 2-bed range, obviously a little under 1,000. So looking at this, looking at the CMHC stats, looking at the property itself, we believe that these are in line with what market rental rates would be for the property on the open market. Indeed, they do look at what market is when they set the rents for the property. We've added in the parking revenue of $80,000, and there is no laundry revenue for the property. Let's move to the expenses, page 17. In this case, we've elected to use their actual vacancy for 2022, which was a little over $13,000 in our analysis. And we'll discuss that later, maybe. Expense allowance, page number 18, 3-year stabilization as is standard. You can see the actual amounts. So we range between $1,165,000 to a little over $1.2 million in 2022. Fairly progressive, even line, fairly even expenses there. We've done the stabilization for it for 2023, as is normal. We've adjusted the property management fee to 5% of effective gross income, dramatically reducing that cost, as you can see, by about $100,000 or so. Where appropriate, we've used the actuals, and we come to an expense allowance of $1,163,202 based on the actuals for the property. Capitalization rate. So we've discussed this at length. Nothing changes here. What I will point out, our difference from the prior property, aside from location, which does have an impact, not 2.5% impact, but does have an impact, is that this property is owned by the housing co-op. So we're not in a lease situation here. So that does have an impact on how an investor would view it and the cap rate that would result from any transaction. So our standard range, again, is that standard low of 5% for your best blue chip type of properties, up to the upper end of 6%, again, for investment grade properties. Now, our sales data supports this on page numbers 19 and 20. Won't get into individual discussions, but I'm happy to answer any questions on those. Outside of that, we still have the situation where we have a nonprofit housing co-op and the differences that would create in how an investor would look at a purchase of property such as this. So overall, we have elected to use a capitalization rate at the upper end of the range at 6%, not above the upper end of the range, for all of those reasons. So this is summarized on my page number 23. The actual rental income, which is supported by market there, $2,064,408, giving you an average market rent of $1,147. The actual vacancy of 13,000, so considerably below the projection of the city, giving us effective gross of $2,158,471, and the actual expenses of, or rather the projected expenses of $1,163,774. Now, the 2022 expenses, I will point out, were $1,211,905. Our stabilization has brought that down to $1,163,774. This, of course, has the effect of boosting the NOI to 994,697. So we've been very careful and conservative in how this valuation has been done. I think that's a very fair representation of the NOI. The capitalization rate of 6%, again, is a conservative estimate of what an investor would apply to this property in this particular situation with these particular limitations and legal restrictions. So using 6% gives us our final market value for the multifamily portion of $16,578,000. The institutional, I won't go through in any detail. I think the city has overestimated the rent that they would be able to achieve for it. I've provided background with regard to strip center rents in the area on page 25. We've assigned $11 instead of $14.63 to the property and provided our cap rates for it. Summary is on page number 29. And our final market value for the institutional exempt portion comes to $506,000. So essentially, the rent is the big gap there, and you're not going to achieve $14+ in a non-retail location for a daycare is what it is. It's a space that provides daycare for the residents in the area. It's not a money-making situation. In any case, that is my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Assessor, any questions on the applicant's presentation?
No question for this time.
Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Schultz, any questions?
One question on your page 23. You have your vacancy rate at 0.63% versus the city's at 3.6%, and the 13,437. Should that be a deduction off of your gross potential income? You've added it back on.
That's actually going to change it pretty significantly.
Yeah, well, it will change it somewhat. Yes, you are correct, and I do apologize for that. If you give me a moment, I can make the corrections for you.
I've got 2,131,597.
I believe you did the same error on the next property as well in the same place. Yeah.
Lovely. I apologize to all the panel members and the assessor. That's
Not a huge difference, but I just thought in my mind.
yeah, no, I appreciate you catching that, and let's just make the adjustment here. So 2,131,197 minus 1,163. So our NOI then would be $967,423, capped at 6%, would give you $16,124,000. My apologies for that oversight.
Thank you. No further questions then.
So can I get those figures again?
Sure, so the effective gross would be $2,131,197.
Right.
And the expense allowance would be, or sorry, it's the same. Your NOI would be $967,423.
Wouldn't your expense allowance change?
Very marginally with the 5% of effective gross. I could make the adjustment. It would be well under $1,000, I would imagine. I can make that number if you want. 2,158,000. Sorry, 2,131,197 times 0.05. So our management fee was $107,352. that would change to $106,560. So did you want me to?
I don't know, you can change it whatever you want, yeah, so you're just gonna leave that expense allowance the way it is then?
Yeah, for the amount of difference it would make, I'm happy to do it, but I just don't know if.
Okay, so
It's
the
worthwhile.
NOI then is what?
So our difference there, 106,559 minus 107,352, so 792. So our stabilized expenses would become $792 less, so minus 1,1,2,2. So 1,162,410. Two, 131, 197. Minus 167, 423. So you're so the NOI would be 968,787 once we make the 5% management adjustment. So capped at 6% is $16,146,000. Again, I apologize for that.
So you're gonna round it then to,
That is rounded, yeah.
okay, it's rounded, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You're going with the same market rent or as the city had?
No,
Oh, sorry, yeah.
we are under what the city had.
There, let's see. I thought you had mentioned that somewhere in your presentation. I think it's relatively the same, yeah. It's misheard that?
I guess so, yes.
Okay.
There's a fair difference in rent, actually.
And that was based on actuals?
That is based on the actuals and the supportive market evidence.
Yeah. Okay, I have no further questions. Anything in summation, Mr. Assessor?
No thanks.
Mr. Smith, anything in summation?
No, thank you.
Okay. That concludes this property item number 3, 700 River Road. Carry on then to item number 4, 515 Meadowwood. This is an application for revision of the amount of the assessed value. Mr. Assessor, you may begin your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 244220, roll number 80, for roll number 0800464100, 515 Meadowwood Drive, roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023, assess value. We have two classification. I'm going to read the 40. First, 40 exempt. The assessed value for 40 exempt, 532,000. And assessed value for 80 taxable residential, 10,533,000. Altogether 11,065,000. Number of buildings 11. Actual build year 1989. Number of suites 73. Outdoor parking 90. Page 2, you can see the location of the property and also the neighbor, the aerial picture of the property. It's not the bad neighborhood. Page 3, you can see the request for income information, and subject property don't have any sales. Page 4, income value summary. Average monthly rent per unit 1,287, and gross potential income. I'm going to read the apartment portion first. Gross potential rent comes at 1,127,491. Vacancy rate 3.6, and effective gross income comes at 1,086,901. Expense ratio 50.09, and net operating income comes at 542,472. Capitalization rate is 5.15. The estimated market value for the ATT 10,533,000. And I'm going to read the retail portion. Gross potential rent for that retail portion 38,209. Vacancy rate 5%, and effective gross income 36,375. Shortfall rate is $7. Expense ratio 3%. Net operating income comes at 34,059. We have used a 6.4 capitalization rate. The 40E estimated market value comes at 532,000. Page 5, you can see rent comparable for the ATT. And page 6, you can see lease comparable for the retail portion. A subject property has 3,500 square footage in our system, and the rate is 10.94. I have compared the CMHC rent for the model rent, and a percentage of the market rent is 93.79. It's a 7% discount. And page 8, you can see the capitalization rate. Sorry. Those are model-driven capitalization rates. Page 9, you can see the capitalization rate evidence. That's 32 Arden Avenue sales support the capitalization rate. Page 10, municipal assessment and exert. And page 11, you can see the external picture of the building, page 11 and 12. And page 13, you can see the income and expense information. And page 15, 17 up to page 25, income and expense information, and page 26, the CMHC table, and page 27, I add the information about this is a corporate housing. So I have to mention we assess this kind of property as a below average apartment. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, any questions on the assessment presentation?
Just one question, really. Having gone through so on your page number 9, I'm sorry, your capitalization rate evidence, market sales. None of these properties are townhouse properties, is that correct?
Yeah, those are not the townhouse. It's the thing. We don't have much townhouse in the city, so we couldn't find much sale on the townhouse. So these are not the townhouse.
Okay, thank you. That's all of my questions, sorry.
Mr. Whitbread, any questions for the assessor?
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Schultz, any questions for the assessor?
Just one, have you inspected the property?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Oh, sorry, there's one more. So you've got the cap rate of 5.15, and you look at the schedule on page 8, you've got your cap rate guide here for the city of Winnipeg. You've got between, sorry, multifamily, so 4.75. Do you feel to 5.45, this is just an average property, or other than you've seen the external of the buildings?
Like how we assess this kind of property, we gave them like we treat as a below average apartment. So in that case, they our model gave them a higher lower rent and higher expense ratio, and normally we like take the market capitalization rate to value the building.
Okay.
So yeah.
And your rent is just a model on the CMHC, is that correct?
Sorry, can you repeat it?
Your rent that you're using at 1287.09 is a more of a model, just an average model driven, correct?
Yes,
Thank
right.
you. Okay, that's all. No other questions.
Okay, and I have no questions. Mr. Smith, do you may begin your presentation?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So 515 Meadowood Drive, this is the other property that Village Canadian Housing Co-op owns in the city. It's slightly different than the 700 River Road property in that it has both townhouses as well as an apartment, 4-story apartment building fronting on Meadowood. The breakout, or rather the data on the property is shown on my page number 3. 2025 assessment, where the Res 3 is assessed at 10,533,000. You can see the last 2 cycles appeal history where the reductions are shown there for you. And further information, this property again is owned outright by Village Canadian. There is no land lease in place. Was built in 1989 and is owned and operated as a nonprofit housing co-op. Sits on just under 4 acres, and you have the breakout of the suites at the bottom of my page number 3. So in the apartment, there are 8 one-bedroom units, 16 two-bedroom units, and 7 three-bedroom units. Then the townhouses, there are 36 three-bedroom units and 6 four-bedroom units for a total of 73 units in size. So I'll skip forward and look at the property itself. So we have some externals. The top page of 5 is obviously the apartment structure. The bottom is where the daycare common room is located. It's a separate building on the same site. That being the exempt portion of the property. And then we move into the property itself. Some exteriors, and we move into the interiors. The property is designed and operated as a nonprofit for low-income residents and designed as such. So they don't put in, they're not built to the same size and finishes as you would find in a standard market apartment. So they are indeed below average in terms of the kit out of them. And they only replace when needed. There is no full renovation that ends up being done for properties of this nature. Typically, we're looking at plywood cabinetry, laminate countertops, etc. that in many cases date back to the date of construction in '89. So that's the background of the property. The site is shown on my page 12. It stretches back from Meadowood Drive, and the location is shown in on my page number 13 with the map and the dot. Now, if you're looking at where that is, St. Patel Arena is immediately to the south of it across Meadowood Drive. That's where the property is located, just to the west of St. Anne's there in St. Patel. So let's skip forward to the valuation. The rental rate structure for the property is shown in the chart on page number 15. And you can see the charges for the different unit types, rents for the apartment ranging between $8.99 and $12.74, and the townhouses all at $1,225. Now, these are adjusted every year and are in line with market rents for properties that are on the open market for properties of their type. So the actual gross potential based on the in-place rents would come to $1,022,112. Now, we give you both the CMHC average market rental, standard apartment rents on page 16, as well as townhouse rents. And the subject would fall certainly slightly or below the average of those rents. We've also provided the same chart that we did in the past file regarding the townhouse rents. So these are similar nonprofit housing in the city of the same type of bedroom. They vary in location. Obviously, we have one in Tuxedo, one in not River Heights, sorry, Charleswood, a number in that area of 11 Dorset, and then some in River Heights where the Carpathias are 390 and 400. Subject property certainly falls in line with those. And pardon me, we feel is at market for properties of this type. We've added in the parking revenue as well as laundry income, which they get from the apartment building to our analysis. Skipping forward, we've again elected to use the actual vacancy for the subject property from 2022. This does vary somewhat, but we have used this. Reason I point this out is we're being conservative in our estimates all the way through this valuation. So this will have and did on 700 River significant impact overall on the NOI using the actual versus the market stat that the city has used. Expense allowance shown at the bottom of page 18. We've done our stabilization and you can see that the resultant estimate comes to 541,308. We've made adjustments where needed in many cases, or in some cases rather, they hadn't put in what their costs were, and we've made appropriate estimates based on our market knowledge of other properties of their size, etc., and their operations. Obviously, you don't have no waste or snow removal. That's not a thing. So all appropriate adjustments have been made, and our stabilized expense comes in under the 2 years that are shown there. The middle year, well, they're missing a lot of the information. So in any case, that is the background for you there. Cap rate. All of the same commentary holds true. What I will add to this, and I didn't include as our production time was somewhat limited. What I didn't include was any commentary with regard to interest rates, and this covers all of our properties today. What we saw in the period before the April 1st, 2023 valuation date was a very dramatic rise in the Bank of Canada lending rate, and obviously the associated significant rise in mortgage lending rates from institutions. So we saw a rise from 0.5% to 4.5, 4.75% as of the April 1st, 2023 valuation date from spring of 2022. So that's, you're looking at, pardon me, essentially a 4% rise over that time frame. Now, what impact does that have? Well, it has very, very large impact. It freezes the market for one thing. Sales dropped off a cliff. That's why you don't see a lot of cap rate information in our charts or other appellants charts from that period, because there were very, very few sales. This also holds true for the city in that they would have very few sales on which to base the model during that time frame. So a 4% increase in mortgage lending rates is obviously going to have an impact on capitalization rate. If you're borrowing, your cost of borrowing is going to go up dramatically, and that would have a very significant impact on what you would be willing to pay and the resultant cap rate that would be produced by a property. So there's a direct correlation between rising interest rates to that degree, certainly, and capitalization rates. So you would have a very large upward impact on rates. Is it 4%? I'm not saying that, but it would certainly drive you to the upper end of the range that you would be looking at without question. Your return expectations either wouldn't change, or you would have to take a reduction on what you would generate. In any case, that is one point that I haven't discussed. The other point is there's exceptionally few sales of townhouse properties in the marketplace. and therefore very, very few cap rates to look at. But that being said, when they do trade, they typically trade at a higher cap rate. They are less desirable from an investor's perspective in that you have significantly higher operating expenses. Typically, you have more building to maintain, you have more roof, you have more systems. Each of them have their own hot water tank and furnace, etc., all the exterior, versus an apartment building where you have the same number of units all under one system and one one roof essentially. So there's obviously going to be more costs involved in that way. And they tend to be the 3 and 4 bedroom units, which typically end up having more vacancy. So the overall impact of this is that they are less desirable on the marketplace, and they typically do get higher capitalization rates. So all of my other commentary with regard to cap rates remains the same, and we have used 6% as our cap rate in our analysis. So let's skip forward to page 23 and run through this. We've used the in-place rents, which we feel are at market. We've added, of course, in the laundry and parking, giving you your gross potential, which we have then deducted the which I'll have to recalculate, obviously, but we've deducted the actual vacancy rather than a projected vacancy, which is significantly less than the projected vacancy. And the expense allowance, we have stabilized at $541,308, very similar to the city's projection. Capped at 6 gives you that initial $8,881,000, and if you bear with me, I'll make the adjustments to correct that particular value. In the meantime, our projection with regard to the exempt portion is again based on an $11 rate. The actual leasable area is about 650 square feet less than the city has. And we've used a cap rate of 7.25%. That's summarized on page 29. So bear with me for a moment here. 1, 6, 8. So the effective gross would be $1,061,989. The expense allowance would be $540,699. Giving you an NOI of $521,290, capped at 6%, rounded would be $8,688,000.
8688.
That's correct. So that's summarized on page 23. Again, we've been conservative in each of these facets, using the actual expense rather than a projected amount, obviously stabilizing the expenses, and we're only at the upper end of the standard capitalization rate range of 5 to 6%. Once we take into account, obviously the issues with regard to purchasing a nonprofit, and looking at the interest rate environment as well as the townhouse aspect, which covers the other properties that we are looking at today as well. I'd say we're being very conservative in applying a 6% cap rate to this, so final market value, 8,688,000 plus our projected exempt portion of 378,000 as shown on page 29. I'm happy to talk about that if you wish, but I'll save us time and only discuss it if you have questions regarding that. That is my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Assessor, any question for the applicant on his presentation?
No question regarding this.
Ms. Schultz, any questions?
No questions at this time, thank you.
Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
And I have none, thank you.
And I have none. That will then conclude item number 4. Oh, sorry, any summations, Mr. Assessor?
No summation. No, thanks.
Any summation, Mr. Smith?
No, thank you.
Okay, that now will conclude item 4, 515 Meadowwood. And we can then move on to item number 5, 195 Thomas Berry. This is an application for revision of the assessed amount of what amount of the assessment? Mr. Assessor, you may begin your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 244017, roll number 06070073500, 195 Thomas Berry Street. Roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023. Assess value 1,493,000. Classification 20 residential. Liability taxable. Number of building 1, 2-story building. Actual build year 1976. Number of suites 8. Outdoor parking 8. Page 2, you can see the request for income information, and subject's property has one sale on February 7, 2028 for 665,000. Average monthly rent per unit 1,241. Gross potential rent comes at 119,214. Vacancy rate 2.6. Effective gross income 116,114. Expense rate ratio is 40.84. Net operating income comes at 68,693. We have utilized the 4.6 capitalization rate. The estimated market value comes at 1,493,000. And page 4, you can see the rent comparables. And page 5, you can see the capitalization rate. This is a model generated capitalization rate. And page 6, you can see the capitalization rate evidence. Those are those following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose of showing these individual capitalization rate is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-driven capitalization rate. They are not meant to be the comparable specific to the subject property. I believe 727 Sargent Avenue supported our capitalization rate. And page 7, municipal assessment at Excel. And page 8 to 9, exterior picture of the building. And page 11, you can see the income and expense information about the stabilization. And the net operating income supported our model generated net operating income. And page 12, income and income and expense information. Page 13, also the income and expense information. Yeah, up to page 19, income and expense information. So the assessed value 1,493,000 is fair market value. I think because the model generated values model generated net operating income and capitalization rate supported by market information. So this is end of my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, any questions on for the assessor on his presentation?
Yes, just one. Looking at the model generated assessment, so the 2025 model generated assessment has dropped by $16,000 from the 2023 model generated assessment. Is that correct?
Actually, I didn't compare that one.
Okay,
After
that's all my questions. Thank you.
Ms. Schultz, any questions?
No questions at this time, thank you.
Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. Mr. Smith, you may begin your presentation.
Thank you. So 195 Thomas Berry, it is set in St. Boniface. The property was built in 1976. And if you look at my page number 3, you can see some background of it. We have two and 3 bedroom units in kind of an adjoined apartment / townhouse situation, row house more or less. 4 2-beds, 4 3-beds for a total of 8 units. What I will point out, 2023 assessment initially assessed at $1,509,000. 2025 assessment initially assessed at $1,493,000. So the city is projecting a downward increase valuation for the property themselves. This is also the same for a number of other ones today. Let's move into the property itself. Just for time purposes, our income is slightly above what the city of Winnipeg has. Photos are on page 4. You can see exteriors and interiors. It's fairly average, certainly property for the area. The site is shown on page 7 and the location on page number 8. This is not a, pardon me, not a nonprofit. It is a standard market apartment. The in-place rents are shown in the chart, middle of page 10. We've gone with the in-place rents. As I said, they're slightly above what the city has projected for the property. We provide backup rents on page 11 from the market to show we are at market. And then move forward to the expense side. Vacancy 2.6%, certainly very standard, and the subject does experience vacancy. When you have a smaller property such as this, each individual unit vacancy or month of vacancy tends to be greater as well. So we have deferred to the city of Winnipeg's 2.6% vacancy rate. And for the expense allowance, The income and expense questionnaire, total for, the year in question came to $46,712. This is included in the addenda. If you look at it, though, it does not include many of the categories that you obviously have expenses in. So those being standard operational expenses such as property management. You obviously have property management costs. You have professional fees. There's always accounting fees that take place. You have caretaker wages, always caretaker wages and management of the exterior, the yard, etc. So as a result, we have added in only the property management expense of 5% of effective gross income for the stated amount there, and a caretaker wage of $5,000. This would bring the expense allowance in line with market at $57,698. So we're not looking to put in costs that they don't have. We're simply bringing it to where they would truly be operating at. I don't know why those costs weren't included, but they weren't. Cap rate, not the same thing. This is a standard market apartment. However, it is, as noted, a townhouse with the issues that go along with that. I will save us all time and state that given the location and the size of the property, the rent stream, etc., we've used the same cap rate that the city has at 4.6%. Pardon me, in our analysis. So on page number 17, this is summarized. Our in-place rents are higher than the city's. Vacancy, standard vacancy rate. The expenses at $57,698, which are appropriate. We're only adding in expenses that any operation would have, any building would have. And your NOI comes to $62,014. Pardon me, again, we're being conservative in using all of the actuals here, plus appropriate operational expenses. Capitalization rate of 4.6%, reflecting the smaller size of it, gives us the market value of $1,348,000. So that is my presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Assessor, any questions for the applicant on his presentation?
No question.
Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
No, I have none, thanks.
Ms. Schultz, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. Anything in summation, Mr. Assessor?
No, thank you.
Anything in summation, Mr. Smith?
I do not.
That then will conclude item number 5, 195 Thomas Berry. And we have gone through all of the items today. We have heard all the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much for your presentations, Mr. Assessor and Mr. Smith.
Thank you for your time, everyone. Much appreciated.
Yep,
Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Have a nice day.